Stand by. Whoa.
And
we're live, Mr. Mayor.
And is that feedback going to continue to happen? Or is that just him?
I fixed it. We're good to go.
Okay, cool. All right, excellent. Well, welcome to the April 20th, 2021 work session of the Milwaukee City Council. Our first item of business is the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Project, which will be led by our Senior Planner, Vera Collias.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council. Thank you. This presentation is based on the staff report that we posted that included some materials from the April 15th CPIC packet. So you have copies of the parking study, some of the materials from the tree code as well, and a memo from DLCD that I referenced in the staff report. But I will go through the presentation, but I'm hoping we can have some discussion. This is more than just a project update. It's intended to get some feedback from the council on a couple of key questions. And we'll be bringing these same key questions and key issues to the Planning Commission next week as well during a work session. So trying to have simultaneous conversations with you as we go. So if you'll allow me, I have slides, of course. So I'm going to share slides and hopefully this will work. Okay. Just a couple of things to go over again, the project schedule. So we're moving ahead into the April-May timeframe. So we're into refined code concepts, draft code recommendations as we work through all of this with the consultant. We are sort of on target for a summer 2021 code adoption. We're sort of moving that July date to summer now as we get in, as we're experiencing all of these different complicated topics that we're talking about with this code amendment package, but hoping summer that we'll be able to get through all of this and get to adopted code language. Again, we have some policy mandates for this project, increase the supply of middle housing and provide housing choice throughout the city, increase tree canopy, preserve existing trees, and manage parking to enable middle housing and protect trees. And again, our policy mandates are coming from our foundation, which is the comprehensive plan and adherence to our comprehensive plan policies and objectives with a kind of secondary objective for this project to make sure that we are in compliance with House Bill 2001. But the primary goal is compliance with our comprehensive. We've talked about this a little bit before, but some key ideas is what we're calling a livability code, intentionally designing housing or the code for more housing choice, maximizing trees, minimizing on-site pavement, and focusing on the form of the housing as opposed to the zone in which we find it. Some of the code amendments that we are looking at are the overall types of code amendments, simplifying the number of zones, looking at a form-based approach to the code, looking at our on-site parking requirements and proposing some possible amendments to that, establishing a pattern guide or a menu of standards for the housing types throughout the, and then adopting a tree code for residential property. We had a more detailed discussion about that at the April 15th CPIC meeting, and the those proposals or the tree code would be applying to residential property, not just during development, but also there is a non-development track for tree preservation as well that will be part of that code. So I just wanted to jump to our open house number 2 survey. It closed on April 15th. So these are very high level folks that were at the CPIC meeting on Thursday night saw these numbers. So this is a repeat. We're still in the overall analysis of all of the findings that we received. But as of noon on April 15th, we had 115 completed surveys. As you can see by these numbers, we had 65 people participating in the comments section of the open house stations. We didn't have those comments open during the first survey. So we are evolving as we're using the Engage Milwaukee website. And it was a pretty terrific dialogue to see how folks were commenting, not just on the open house materials or the station materials, but they were interacting with each other as well. It was really terrific. You can glean a lot of information from how folks were sharing their experiences or what they thought about the various topics that we were presenting. Again, we had 143 people either commenting or completing surveys. And then we had votes on the comments. So that was interesting as well, that you could do a thumbs up or a thumbs down on people's comments. But overall, it was a very civil dialogue, I would say, on the stations. And the thumbs up or thumbs down were kind of the only way that folks were sort of voting or sharing what they thought about people's comments.
Vera,
and this is, yeah.
Could we go back to that for a second?
Sure.
I'm just curious to know what accounts for those two big peaks in page views and visitors.
I'd like to think it was when I was sending out my email blasts reminding people to take the survey, but that I would have to go back and see. I didn't check when did I send those out, but so I'm not going to take credit for it until I can verify that. But so I'm not exactly sure, but it might have been when, we were sending out, I think, close to 800 emails during those blasts of the people that were on, and folks probably got them a million times, and so I do apologize for that. But we have hundreds of people on our various lists, so it might have been those little nudges for asking for folks to do that. But I can go back and double check that just to make sure.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know,
yeah.
just because it tells us what's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's a good point. Yeah, of course. Peaks. Okay. All right. And on our demographic data, so what you see in the percentage on the left-hand side of that vertical black bar are the percentages, the demographic data from the actual survey, and then to the right of that, so this column, this is the demographic data that we have from our comprehensive plan citywide. So a way of comparing who participated in the survey against what the overall city demographics are. It's a nice way to kind of check ourselves on where we are with having a wider representation of folks taking the survey, and certainly compared to our first open house. But I think we're doing a much better job, and I think we're sort of hitting a target of having sort of the whole city sort of represented, at least in a numbers standpoint, for folks that were participating that took the survey. So it's a much better, much more accurate picture of the city as a whole, I think. So we're pretty happy about that. And these two are blank because the comprehensive plan doesn't have numbers for Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander within the demographic data for the city. Okay. So on to some key issues, if I may. Oh, and I'll just follow up on the survey and the open house. The full analysis will be available later in May. It'll be part of the packet for the May 20th CPIC meeting. So you folks will have access to all of that, but it's still our Barney and Worth, our community engagement consultant folks are still combing through all of that data. And I see Councillor Falconer, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, did I catch in the packet that maybe we fell short on renter representation though?
We had 4% renter respondents to the survey.
Yeah, and I don't know what our numbers are right now, but I think the last time I saw numbers, it was about 42% of our residents.
Correct. Yeah, it's a lot more than that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So maybe we have some work to do there.
Yeah.
I do wonder about those whole results, because people could check multiple boxes, but not maybe everybody understood they could check multiple boxes. So some people checked live in Milwaukee and some people checked rent or own, but did everybody who checked live in Milwaukee check either rent or own? It didn't seem like it added up that they did. So I think that giving people the option to select multiple options may be a problem, and we might get more reliable data in future surveys if we say live in Milwaukee renter, live in Milwaukee owner, or something like that.
That, if I don't mean to interrupt you, sorry, Councilor Beatty, but so the demographic data wasn't part of our survey. That's the demographic data that you respond to when you register for the site. So it wasn't specific to the survey. Those were the respondents to our survey, but all that demographic data was shared when folks registered on the site. So it may be something to chat with Jason and Jordan and those folks that are sort of in charge of that end of the Engage Milwaukee site, just to see, how do we clarify? Is there a way to kind of glean some more?
I mean, it would be good to
information for
see if
that?
they add up. I mean, maybe they do add up, but it didn't seem to me that they did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I can double check on that. Yeah.
And I think going forward, we could fix that pretty easily just by asking, do you rent a home in Milwaukee? Do you own a home in Milwaukee? And just leave out the question about, that very first question that's a little too open-ended, and just leave it at that.
I would agree. Okay. Demographic data. Okay. All right. Okay. So we had a couple of key issues that we wanted to talk with you about. The first one has to do with flag lots. And so on the screen, and these are images that were from the staff report, but on the screen you see, so this is sort of a graphic of the parts of a flag lot. If you imagine this entire rectangle was one lot, in the blue is what we would call the parent lot, and then here in the white is the flag lot, and this is the pole, and this is the flag portion of the flag lot. So this is a land division process where you would create two lots where you can't do them side by side. It's the way to kind of do up and to the back. This is an image of a real one from here in the city. So 2824 was the parent lot, and then 2844 is the flag lot behind. So it results in a dwelling behind the original or the parent lot. So this, over the last several years, we in the planning department, we've responded to a lot of questions from folks that are looking to develop flag lots on their properties. And for the most part, these are the kinds of lots that are fairly narrow and really deep. So they're somewhere in the 70 to 75 feet wide and 220, 240 feet deep. They're really big lots. This is a snippet. These purple lots here are, and this was and it's definitely not an all-inclusive list, but sort of just a visual survey of what in looking in, particularly in the Ardenwald neighborhood, there are a lot of subdivisions here that were platted with these kinds of narrow, deep lots. So they can't be divided side by side because they would be too narrow based on our minimum lot width standards. So flag lot potential are just kind of an illustrative example of these. Again, this isn't by no means the complete list. This was just sort of a visual just to take a look and see where a lot of these, I'll call them flag lot opportunities, might be. But they're generally in the R7 zone where we find them. And again, in the Ardenwald neighborhood, the majority of them, that's where they are. The issue that we're sort of talking about here is sort of how our code has evolved over time in how flag lots can or cannot be developed. What we've had to tell folks, and certainly since 2002, 2003, that's when the flag lot standards that we have now came into being. So we're coming on 20 years of having the current flag lot standards that make it pretty difficult to develop a flag lot or to be able to divide your property. But back in 1979 is when we had our first flag lot standards. And in 1994, the access width, or that pole width, was reduced from 20 feet to 15 feet. And I got some back staff reports, and part of that was to promote infill development. At the time, that was sort of the goal, to be able to get units in those big backyards. Then the 20-foot requirement was restored, but they in 1998. But the area of the pole, part of the flag lot, was excluded from the minimum lot size. So you ended up with a much larger requirement for lots. And there was, from what we what I could glean from the staff reports, there was some growing neighborhood dissatisfaction with the number of flag lots and kind of what that meant in those neighborhoods. I've got some images in a next slide that sort of, you can see that they're sort of all in a row on multiple streets. And at the time, it looked like that the city was approving variances for various things to get more of these flag lots developed. And some of those pole widths are 15 feet. There's a couple that are 10. So they sort of went all over the place from a variance standpoint. So a lot more flag lots were developed. So then in 2002, there was a bigger code amendment package. And I think Councilor Beatty sent out some minutes or notes from some of those hearings, and the result of which are basically the lot standards that we have now. So the access requirement or the width of that pole needs to be 25 feet, and you cannot get a variance from that. So you cannot, right now, there are variances are prohibited from anything that has to do with the shape or area of the flag lot itself. Setbacks were increased. So now we have front and rear setbacks of 30 feet on the flag lot as opposed to 20 feet. Side setbacks are 10 feet instead of 5 and 10. You can't have more than 2 abutting flag lots, and there are planting and screening requirements that are part of the code as well. But the 25-foot access requirement and that you can't get any variances for any of those things, those are the 2 key pieces that preclude folks from being able to get variances now. Because if you could address that 25-foot pole width situation, you end up with a parent lot that is significantly narrower than what is required. We typically have a 60-foot width requirement. So now you're ending up with a parent lot that's 42, 45 feet wide, and it starts to get, they're very significant variances, and folks are generally not kind of willing to take the chance on a type 3 variance with the Planning Commission like that. It's a very discretionary, and it's not a guarantee that you'll get that. So 2002 is kind of when the turn kind of came, and we had the standards were set. And I see Councilor Beatty have your hand up, and you're muted. Sorry.
You mentioned the setbacks being changed. Mm-hmm. Was anything else about the code as it applies to the structure changed? I mean, is the height different, or any of those kind of things different, or those are
no? Yeah, no, the design standards and the height for the structures themselves are the same. The front door of the flag lot house needs to face the front, so they don't face sideways. They do have to face the front, but all of the design standards are the same for the structure itself for the home. Yeah. So a couple of the questions that we thought it was worth asking about as we're in this middle housing code update package is how do we handle flag lots? Certainly any one of these sort of narrow lots, and you can see outlined in blue some of these flag lots that were created back in the day, I would say. And so you can see that on a couple of these streets, you might have multiples in a row, and you see how narrow the pole is on some of these. In fact, this one is sort of a double flag lot, but it's only for one house. I didn't go back to see kind of how that happened, but we end up with sort of a T-shaped lot here. And so as we're thinking about this housing code that we're working on, certainly, any of these sort of long and narrow lots could develop, certainly a duplex, a triplex, a quad, or 4 units, 3 units, all the way, to the back. So that can happen. The difference here is there the ability to create a separate lot, sort of to actually split it and have kind of a home ownership opportunity, I guess I would say, for some of these. The other kind of question that, we're asking, are we coming around? Is this something that we want to consider, developing more of, or making some of these standards a little bit easier to meet? Another option is having the code. This is a part of the lotting pattern at Cheragino Farms off of Lake Road. This was approved in the county. The county considers these kinds of rear lots as flag lots, but they don't have the actual flag pole, all of these back lots are accessed via an easement over the front lot. So the county doesn't require actual frontage on the street. They require access easements to be able to get to these lots in the back. So just as part of the conversation, options as well could be to eliminate the minimum street frontage requirement and allow rear lots to be accessed via easements instead. So this is just sort of all part of the dialogue. Councillor Beatty, you're muted.
I went to drive by those today because I had noticed them before, but I didn't realize till this staff report that they're not, that driveway doesn't belong to the lot behind. It looks like those are 12 to 15 feet, I would guess.
They're 20. They're 20 feet. The easement itself is 20 feet. And then the driveway itself is 12 to 14 feet. I'd have to go back and look at the plans, but the paved width is a little bit narrower than that generally. And
so the easement is, how is it worked out? Who's responsible for maintaining the driveway, et cetera?
Yeah, I haven't gone back to look at the easement language itself. The easement is on the front property to the benefit of the rear property, but I haven't pulled all the easement language to see kind of how they handle the maintenance piece of it. It's a good question. I haven't pulled that information. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to know what, which is easier for the city, which is easier for the landowners. I thought that was an interesting thing there. So yeah. Anyway, I was curious if there was any reasons that this might be more desirable than the requirement of the actual flag-shaped lot.
Let's see. Okay. So yeah. So some of the key. So kind of given sort of all of the history that we have and the idea and to the material that Councillor Beatty shared with the with council about sort of some of the things that folks were talking about within the testimony that were in those hearings about livability, having dwellings in backyards and that sort of thing. I think it's an interesting time to talk about this, given that the new housing code, could certainly result in housing in the backyards already. So it's sort of this added piece of trying to think about flag lots and that idea of being able to divide your property that way. One of the things a couple of questions that we have for council is, do we want to make flag lots easier? Are there certain conditions or circumstances where you might consider doing that? And this is a question, for middle housing development. Is that something that we want to think about if we wanted to open this up? If the idea of, well, okay, flag lots are okay, but do we want just a single unit dwelling on that back lot? Is there an incentive to want to encourage middle housing development on its own lot? Again, this home ownership opportunity question. So we just have a lot of questions, but we wanted to raise these issues as we're working on all of the different code amendments, because we will need to address sort of our flag lot standards as part of all of this. And we can certainly leave them like they are. It's because it's really a land division kind of standard as opposed to the housing type itself. But it's how we do the math. How do we calculate the size of the lot? How do we calculate allowing them even to be divided this way? So there are some things that make it more difficult to do based on the standards that we have right now. So these are a couple of questions that we've got.
So flag lots, by their nature, are probably going to encourage typical development, which is maximizing the footprint of the building to maximize profits. Therefore, they're not really going to be middle housing. They're just going to be more overpriced, single family housing. Have you guys thought about a higher and better use? For example, just throwing it out that we could allow more than one ADU. What do we call them? External ADUs or whatever. uh, which then is going to lead to smaller homes, but more affordable homes, or encourage somehow small cottage clusters. Or I've never been a fan of flag lots kind of in general, and I don't think making flag lots easier gets us anywhere closer to more affordable housing. I think it just is going to be more of the same expensive housing. So my interest would be, how do we tweak this so that we encourage the development of more affordable housing units on those long lots if people want to, garner some income from their big lot.
I think if I could, the couple things I might respond to what you're saying is that, with the new middle housing requirements, what would be a flag lot could, depending on its area, of course, could accommodate certainly a single unit home. As you said, we are talking about, 1 ADU, 2 ADUs, for a single unit home, but duplexes must be permitted on any lot that allows a single unit home. So a duplex could be permitted on a flag lot as well. A triplex on a lot that's a minimum 5,000 square feet. So the middle housing aspect of all of this would be available on a flag lot as well. So it's because those housing types are permitted per the lot size. It's not about the zone. So
Right.
What we're more talking about, or the question is about actually getting the land division to happen, to be able to do that. Does that mean that they have to build a triplex just because it's a 7,000 square foot lot or whatever? No, of course not. And that's kind of part of this, why we sort of just inserted the question. Do we want to change our flag lot standards or provide some incentives for flag lots if a middle housing type were developed? It's, again, part of all of the questions we're asking ourselves all day long as we're talking about these code amendments. So, but we wanted to spark the conversation at least, and talk about that.
I'm curious what the foundation is for your assertion, Mayor.
Which assertion?
That flag lots will just, by their nature, result in building another expensive single-family house.
I would say that is the nature of every lot.
But isn't that what we have just spent the past year and a half and continue to work on, is to change the nature of things? So I don't understand what it is about a flag lot that is different from your average 5,000 square foot lot, in an R5 zone.
Nothing from that standpoint. It doesn't encourage middle housing. It's exactly the same as every other lot. It doesn't encourage middle housing. That's my point. I'm saying that if we want to take this relatively, and not everybody feels this way, but relatively undesirable concept of a flag lot and utilize that to cause, that's the thing with our code. Nothing in our code is causing middle housing. It's allowing.
Well, it hasn't allowed it, and that's part of the reason we haven't seen it. So the idea that the future will be the same as the past, I don't think is necessarily accurate. We have disallowed many types of home in this city for 50, 60 years. I noticed that Peter and Desi have had their hands up for a while.
Sorry. Whoever was first, I don't know. Do you know?
I think I was. I just wanted to mention, flag lots can be difficult to serve customers for utilities. There's an additional burden to run the service line for water and sanitary sewer and electrical. And, new flag lots aren't problematic, but customers 30 or 40 years from now, if they need to replace a service, it can be pretty expensive for that resident. So.
But that's going to be the same whether it's a cottage cluster or 2 ADUs or anything else, right?
It is, but perhaps then there's it would be the same.
Okay, thanks. Desi?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. How many flag lots have duplexes on them? And then have there been folks applying to have more like duplexes built on a flag lot?
Great question, Counselor. To my knowledge, we don't have any duplexes on flag lots. Our current standards for duplexes require twice the minimum lot size for a single unit home for a duplex. So many of these lots that could be flag lots aren't 3 times the size; they're just twice the size. So the flag lot ends up being generally oversized, but it's not oversized enough to be able to have a duplex. So I'm pretty sure we don't. Not to my knowledge, we don't have any. I don't think. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Oh, have people tried to build duplexes on flag lots before, or?
Yeah, no, again, the lot sizes aren't large enough. And generally, generally the questions that I've been getting from, speaking for myself, from folks that want to develop flag lots, it's someone that wants to split their lot so that, and it's not universal, of course, but a family member, an adult son or daughter to be able to build a house in the backyard. I mean, that's not guaranteed, of course, but these are folks with really large lots that, are hoping to do something with them. And right now they can't. Certainly under the housing code amendments, their opportunities or their options will be much greater than they are now. I hope that answers your question about duplexes. Yeah.
So folks aren't selling. So are the majority of folks selling their lot then, or is it, or you don't know how, like, is it just folks who own it want to split it for family, or they're selling it as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, I have fielded calls from the folks that own the property that want to split it and have their son, daughter, somebody be able to build a house in the back. We've certainly had developers that have picked up a property and then developed a flag lot off of it. So it can be, any of the above, but we have, I have, spoken to folks that are more specifically asking about being able to put a house in their backyard for their, for their son or daughter. They can certainly do that through an ADU, of course, but that's not an ownership opportunity for, for the child. So, or for the son or daughter. So it's just generally not something. And now of late, I've been able to tell people just, can you wait a second? Because we're in this code amendment process, maybe something will happen. And so, so folks are sort of biding their time, I think, to see where we land on the code amendments. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
Thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
So do I understand correctly, if we make flag lots more permissive, and I guess even if we don't really, HB 2001 means our setback standards won't be able to continue. The increased setback standards for the flag lots won't be able to continue. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Yeah, we'd have to be applying the same. But I will double check that just to make sure. I mean, it's about, but it's well, I actually think they can, because it's the same setbacks for a single unit home as anything else.
Okay.
So what the House bill does is it's per housing type, that we don't make the standards more difficult, the setbacks, height, whatever, is the same, for the middle housing as it is for a single unit. This is all about the lot itself. So
it doesn't set a minimum. I was, for some reason, thinking it set a minimum, front yard and side yard
no.
setback. Or
The model code does,
Okay.
but the House bill itself, you just have to make sure that you're consistent
Okay.
with middle housing and the single unit homes. Yeah.
Okay, and then follow-up question to follow on your conversation with the mayor. We could, I think what you were saying is we could incentivize middle housing. We could say reduce restrictions, reduce flagpole width, reduce whatever, if you're going to build middle housing versus if you're going to build a single home.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, I think so. So I
Okay.
think that's what we want to explore.
And we could put, I'm not saying we want to, I'm just trying to get the parameters of what we could do. We could put, 4 townhouse lots, 4 smaller lots back there as opposed to 1 big lot.
Yeah, we'd have to, that's all part of the land division piece of it. And so we would have to, work through what that means. Exactly. I mean, flag lots exist now. So, what does it mean? How does a townhouse development work on a flag lot? We'd have to figure that out. But
And so to go to Peter's point about the costs of replacing the utilities, I mean, having more units to share the cost of that utility work is a good thing, I guess. Does that play into the thought about whether we keep our historic style of flag lots versus what's happened in Cheragino, the easement option? The whole utility running utilities, managing utilities, any of that, does it really matter? Maybe it doesn't.
No, I mean, the utilities are in an easement. Yeah, I mean, they'd be in an easement, I guess, as opposed to being in your own property, sort of on the, in the pole, I guess. So, they would be in an easement. It's a shared utility easement, access easement. That's sort of what it's called on the plat for Cheragino. I just don't know what the actual language is for the easement, but I can easily pull it. I talk to those guys all the time. So,
there are cities where, Portland being a big city, or, maybe other even suburbs where they have both, and they might have some advice about which is less problematic.
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to know.
Yep, I can certainly find that out.
Sarah, do you need any more information on flag lots tonight, or do you want to move on to your next one? Just looking at the time, we're at 4:38, and we only had the schedule till 4:45.
Thanks. Yeah. Is it fair to say that the council in general would be willing to explore incentives for flag lot standards for middle housing?
Yeah, I am. I'm also very curious about some of the questions Lisa's asking around easement versus pole.
Okay.
I will say, I think I'm kind of ambivalent about the flag lots. I do see them as a way to, I think there's a lot of potential to them in terms of breaking up what I'm more worried about, which is somebody who comes in and wants to plop a, 7,000-foot megastructure on that long, skinny lot that towers over everything on both sides of it. So I think breaking up the lot has some benefit in that regard. I will say that both the notes I sent you guys, the link I sent you guys with the notes about the 2002 discussions, as well as what the mayor will recall well from being on Planning Commission 10 years later, the discussions when we put in ADU code to facilitate ADUs, is there's a lot of concern out there, people losing their privacy in their backyards. And so the screening requirements were really important. And the height restrictions, may be an issue. So, I think there are a ton of thorny questions there about what we allow on a flag lot. And I would like to see some of that kind of stuff be in our surveys and be more out there, because we know people objected to flag lots before. So we should be maybe being a little more out there that we're talking about this, and not wait until we've got a code package that's done. That's my thought on it.
Okay. I see that. No, Councilor Beatty, your hand is still up. Do you have another? Okay, great. Okay. All right. Let me go back to the presentation. All right, and we included a second key issue of and Counselor Falconer brought this up at the last meeting. So I just wanted to cover it and make sure folks were on, so we're all on the same page with the understanding that where staff is and the consultant is going with this. It's the minimum lot size versus the location-based standard for the middle housing types. It's sort of called the performance metric in the House bill and all of that language, but I'm calling it location-based as a way of describing what we're talking about. But so there are two ways within the House bill as how a city can determine where middle housing types are permitted. And so there's a way to sort of designate areas, quote unquote, within the city, but you have to meet the performance metric, meaning there's a minimum percentage of lots that have to be available for each of those housing types. And so that's this number here on the screen, and it was in the staff report. So it's not nothing, it's a lot. So I think there was some discussion or some thought very, very early on that, we would be focusing middle housing in certain areas, for example, on transit corridors as an example. But with these kinds of minimum numbers for the performance metric, it has to be more lots than that, or more, areas than that. There's also been quite a bit of discussion about not focusing all the middle housing in certain areas, the idea being an equitable distribution throughout the city so that the housing types would be allowed throughout the city. And that's the minimum lot size standard. And that's the recommendation from staff and the consultant to be moving in that direction, that housing types be permitted everywhere. And it's all based on the minimum lot size for each housing type. And that, again, equitably distributes the housing throughout the city. And that's very clearly expressed to us through the comprehensive plan, that these housing opportunities ought to be everywhere. So we're moving forward with a recommendation for the minimum lot size approach. And so in the staff report, we wanted to kind of go through that analysis and just sort of lay that out for council to make sure that, again, that we're all sort of understanding that, because the question had come up. And we, in the staff report, we outlined sort of how this relates to the comprehensive plan. We pulled out some of the key housing policy numbers that were there. And then we also cited a DLCD staff report that they put together for the Land Conservation and Development Commission. It was dated back in October, but they actually went through an analysis of various communities, or actually all of the cities that would be subject to the House bill, to kind of get a sense of how different would the numbers be for the percentages of lots under each standard. And as we put in there, between the location-based and the minimum lot size approach, they're pretty close, certainly for Milwaukee as far as the percentages. So it's not as if, they kind of, we end up at the performance metric approach by doing the minimum lot size approach. And we also get the added benefit of distributing the housing types throughout the city. I hope that was helpful. I know I included the entire memo that DLCD put together, but it was only one part of it. But when they went through trying to figure out the baseline of lots and then compared it, that concluded that, we're at the performance metric approach by still using the minimum lot size approach. And I think that's what we're looking for, and that's the direction that we're getting that we're gleaning from the comprehensive plan on that. So that's our recommendation between the two approaches. So our key, question is just kind of confirming or ask, first of all, if you have any questions, of course, but also to confirm that council supports that recommendation, or that's our approach, that we are using the minimum lot size approach for the middle housing types. So that's our question. I'll go back to this slide in case folks have questions.
Thoughts? Go ahead, Lisa.
So, I think your memo, assuming that you're right, that the 70%, 80% numbers, the percentages apply to all residential lots, that percentage of all residential lots in the city, and not just that percentage of residential lots that meet the minimum size requirements? Because I think those are two very different questions. But assuming that that is what the law says, I think your memo makes a pretty compelling argument that it's not worth differentiating. It's not worth the location-based would be, the location carve out would be so small that it would not make a lot of sense. I will say though that I do take some issue with the point in the staff report and that the comp plan calls for them everywhere, because that was actually quite conscientiously a question we deferred at the comp plan because and that was based on representations from the planning director at the time and David Levitan at the time, who were running that process, that we did have a choice between a corridors concentration and every residential lot choice. And so I think we I certainly purposefully avoided wording that prejudged that. So I would not treat the comp plan as having determined that we should allow them everywhere. Just that we needed to allow them more places. But that said, I do think, and I will say that the city's consultant basically got this wrong in the February CPIC meeting, because I asked this explicit question and she said we were required to put them everywhere. And obviously this staff report makes clear that that's not really the case. But anyway, I mean, it doesn't seem like, other than for triplexes, there's really not much we could carve out. And so it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense to carve out a location-based approach.
Anybody else? I think the lot size approach is fine. I think that does make it more equitable.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just say that, if the language in the comp plan is a little squishier, the language in the vision isn't, and that it's pretty clear that, when we were putting together the vision, we were calling for equitable distribution of housing choice throughout the city. So if we were a little bit more surgical in our language in the comp plan, I can understand why some folks, might want to see that, but I do think that we also always need to kind of go back to that vision, and it definitely calls for more affordability and housing choice throughout the city.
Okay. Thanks very much. Sorry. I do have, just letting you know, next steps. We are working on additional refined code concepts, the synthesis report, recommendations, and we're setting up technical review meetings with the city engineer, the city attorney. In fact, I already sent him something today. I'll be sending him something again next week to kind of go through these various iterations of actual recommended code language. The consultant is working on the full analysis of the outreach results, so we will have that in a couple of weeks. We added a CPIC meeting in May, so we'll be having that on May 20th, where we'll be working through more of these questions as we continue forward into the summer, into our actual code amendments. So we're doing a lot every day on this, but we welcome any questions or comments, concerns as you take a look at all this stuff, including the parking study as well. But I encourage you to take a look. We also posted the presentation materials from the April CPIC meeting on the CPIC page. So there's some interesting stuff there if you want to sort of a nuts and bolts look at what the parking study included, as well as the outline of the tree code. That's all in there as well. And happy to send that link out if you can't find it on the site.
Vera, I can send you questions separately, but I do want to make sure that I keep seeing, like a reference to one parking space per unit. And I want to make sure that we're always reconciling that with the rule around, parking requirements for specific, can be no more than certain number of lots per the rulemaking in the model code for HB 2001 based on lot size and not number of units. So there are places throughout the city where one parking spot per unit might actually be more than what we're allowed to do. And I just want to make sure that we're sort of reconciling that as the CPIC is having conversations around that.
Yeah, I had a thought about parking too, but are we not going to go through that at some later point, or do you just not have questions about it?
We can certainly talk about the parking study. I mean, maybe not tonight because we're sort of out of time, but I'm scheduled with you folks for an 2-hour study session in May. And so we can work through. So if you have specific questions like that, that'll help me guide kind of what we talk about in May. I already have a bunch of stuff to talk about, but if there are specific things that I should cover in the staff report, let me know. So Councilor Falconer, if you have specific questions about that, but I'll make sure that this parking piece is covered at the study session.
Yeah, let's add
sure.
parking ratios.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that it? Everybody good? Okay.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you, Vera.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.
Legislative and regional policy issues, and this will be presented by our Assistant City Manager, Kelly Brooks.
Hi, everybody. So I brought this up in the agenda because Power is with us at 7, so I thought it would be good if you all had a chance to talk before instead of after. I hope you got my email. I am sorry. Karen is great. So I'm super excited to have her, but it looks like we'd have to try to reschedule Senator Taylor if we'd like to have her come back. I think things are just getting kind of busy. They've probably been kind of busy for a little bit. And she had a conflict. So the two things that I wanted to make sure we got to is Councilor Falconer sent around a letter about a potential sign-on for increased funding for transit at the federal level. So I wanted to make sure y'all had time to talk about that. And then the one thing I wanted to kind of give the mayor and Kathy a chance to provide any quick updates on green building codes and green tariff, just because I'm assuming those are two things that you're probably going to want to touch on with Representative Power in about an hour or so. And then last but not least, I emailed you all about this, but I did, at Representative Power's request, submit 2 projects that could be considered for lottery bond funding. And one was Monroe Greenway and the other is Milwaukee Bay Park. So I was going to touch on those, just make sure you know what I said, so that if she asks about those or you have questions, I can get to them. That was just on lottery bonds. I think that same email included information about requests that went to the governor's office. We're not going to talk about the governor's office ones today, even though there's duplication on those lists. So that's that. So why don't we start with tariff and building code? Does that work?
Sure.
And I can say what I know because I asked Natalie. Both are in Ways and Means. So they passed out of their committees of jurisdiction and are in Ways and Means. And so I think the next push, it sounds like, is to, they're still alive. That's great. I believe there's one element, 2 amendments passed on the green tariff bill. One was positive. The other one wasn't as positive. And now it's in Ways and Means to kind of work through those issues. Is that what else would you guys like to add to it?
Yeah, so the not positive part that got added to the green tariff bill was that Northwest Natural added an amendment that was really open-ended, has some odd language that makes it a little scary, that was not vetted through anybody, through any city. There was no city that requested this, although they told people that we requested it and that Eugene requested it. So there you go, Northwest Natural. But it's not good language. We don't like it. We would like it out. We thought this was going to go to the House and we could pull it out at that point, but because it goes to Ways and Means, if and when it comes out of Ways and Means, it goes directly to the floor. So we won't have a chance to change it. It's harder to change things in Ways and Means, but we have a meeting scheduled with Mike Dembro to try and, with all the various stakeholders, to try and figure out if we need to and what. In any case, it's not awesome. There's the possibility that the language we need out of that bill could pass in HB 2021, which is the bigger environmental bill. And then we don't care. But that's also the bill that, if I'm a betting man, is the one that the Republicans choose to walk out on.
And I'll just, to clarify the bad language from Northwest Natural, I was an attempt to create something that would sound like a green power product for natural gas. And it's just very, very poorly crafted, extraordinarily poorly crafted. So, great idea, but not vetted and not well put together or really viable seeming in any way, shape, or form.
And if I may jump in, my name's Natalie, Climate Action Sustainability Coordinator. There's kind of two elements of the Northwest Natural Amendment that are concerned. The first is the green tariff structure, which would be the same as kind of what we're pursuing with PGE, and that working with your electric utility, a community could set up essentially a voluntary program to fund some sort of project or rate structure to incentivize, I guess in this case it would be renewable natural gas or hydrogen. Like Mayor Gamba mentioned, we haven't really talked about this at all with Northwest Natural, but it's voluntary. The more concerning amendment is really including language within the resiliency section of the bill, SB 784. The resiliency section essentially allows ratepayers to help pay for resiliency improvements related to the electrical grid and carbon-free electricity, et cetera, which would be needed in our decarbonization efforts. When we include resiliency language related to natural gas, that gets concerning for us because that increases investments in fossil fuel infrastructure, which will make it harder in the long run for us to move away from fossil fuel infrastructure because we've now just paid a lot of money for it. Also, the language is very open-ended, as Councillor and Mayor Gamba, and doesn't restrict it. It kind of is mystic around renewable natural gas and emissions. So it's kind of like directly or indirectly reduces emissions, and there are no promises, I will say, and what that could be. And so we just find it concerning related to our decarbonization goals, as well as any effort that we want to do in the future to move away from fossil fuels. And the fact that there just wasn't any stakeholder engagement, no conversations around it, unlike the rest of the bill.
So
go ahead. Sorry. I just want to kind of think. So what since we have Natalie and Peter here, what do you think that the request is to Representative Power on this at this juncture? What will we like her to do?
I think it's advocating for keeping the goal of decarbonization front and center in this and pushing back on Northwest Natural's amendments here. And just, making sure that in SB 784, we continue to see the language we need to be able to offer the green power product that our community needs and that we need in order to meet our climate action goals.
Yeah, so either pulling the Northwest Natural language out or adding language that says anything done in this realm must lead to further decarbonization or further reduction of greenhouse gases, which their language very much doesn't say that. Their language acts as if natural gas is somehow climate friendly.
Yeah, and that concern that Natalie brought up about increasing investment in fossil fuels infrastructure, that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe that can set up this awkward situation with the PUC where you end up with stranded costs that the consumer is then responsible for in the long run, and it gets ugly and expensive and really complicated, and it ends up in work. And none of those things are good either for our residents or for the goal of further decarbonization.
And I think because of the vagueness of the Northwest Natural language, this bill and the rulemaking for it are going to take longer with the PUC than it would have had they just stayed out of it. So that's going to mean that our work with PGE is going to be delayed even further. So first choice is to just get Northwest Natural's language back out.
PGE did let us know that they are asking Northwest Natural to reach out to all of the stakeholders who have been involved with this bill to have conversations. PGE made it clear that they don't want to lift it for Northwest Natural and that we should be hopefully hearing from them.
Can I ask one follow-up, Natalie? I'm sorry, I don't know this, but is it going to full Ways and Means or Natural Resources?
Natural Resources.
So I think this might be we want to get into. So that is co-chaired by Senator Taylor, who can. So that maybe just be another follow-up that maybe Rep. Power could help us with out of tonight, because that's where it's going. Is to specifically speak with Senator Taylor about removing the language. Is that fair?
It is.
And Senator Taylor did vote no on including the amendment, but yes on moving the bill. So.
Which is what we asked her to do via text right in the middle of the hearing, because that was frantic. But she is wanting us or someone to create a coalition of people on the Democratic side that will back that, because right now Senator Beyer is all for keeping the Northwest Natural language, and she I think she feels like she's standing against the wind there.
This may be a naive question, but is there a version of Northwest Natural, what they're trying to do, that we would say is okay? And would there be any opportunity to, sort of to work on something for the next legislative session or something that would?
Well, that's exactly. Yeah. So they called up and asked. They said, "Hey, we would love to do this too." And I said, "Great, let's write a bill for the next session. Let's work on that. Let's workshop it. Let's figure out what that would look like, and let's do a bill in the next session." And they took that language from me and went out and said, "Mayor Gambit's very enthusiastic about us having this language."
Yeah, but doing it in this session is a non-starter. It's way too late in the session to be doing the kind of engagement with stakeholders and thinking through the technical issues of it to get there in time for this session. It's really a non-starter.
But do we give Senator Taylor and anyone who's with her some backstopping, come out publicly and say, we don't support this, but we'll work with you, we'll work with Northwest Natural for something for next session? I guess that's where I was trying to go with that.
Yeah, but what that would be in language, because we haven't gotten the workshop, right?
Right.
We had put a lot of effort into conversation with PGE before this bill was developed.
Right.
So that we kind of knew what the language was we needed, or at least, a general direction for it. We have no idea what that would look like with Northwest Natural.
Right.
I have based on this conversation, I have a revised tweak to what I think we should ask. So maybe it sounds like you've already been speaking with Senator Taylor. She knows where she is. She voted the right way. She doesn't need any more education. She needs friends. So if Representative Power could reach out to Jeff Reardon, that would be helpful because he's on this committee. And it also sounds like you said, Mayor Gamba, that there was some indication that Eugene was in support, but they weren't really. And Representative Holvey is on this committee, so that would be another place. Maybe if the city could help reach out to Eugene directly, and then if there was some additional follow-up that Representative Power might be willing to do with him.
Isn't Senator Jama also on this committee?
I don't see. I see Lou Frederick. No, I don't see if I'm looking at the right list. So.
Okay.
So I think that that's maybe we don't have to get into that level of specificity, but just her help with her House members that are on this subcommittee would be a huge help. It sounds like.
PGE, I did want to mention PGE thought it was going to be difficult to remove that language because the Ways and Means and even the Natural Resource Subcommittee wasn't a policy committee. So, they thought it was really going to be a tough lift to get that language removed.
Yep.
I agree. And what is the priority, getting it out or getting the bill passed? Sorry, but that is kind of what I would ask if I were her.
It's what we told, Senator Taylor, vote against the amendment, but please vote for it. So it was hilarious. The Republican voted for the amendment, so we got the dang amendment in there, and then I believe voted against the bill with the amendment in it. I'm not sure about that.
Does this, I know this isn't, we could keep talking about this and it would actually be fun to keep talking about because it's fun to strategize, but I want to make sure that there's enough time to actually talk about the letter that Councillor Falconer had. And I wanted to make sure, Councillor Heisey, that you had a chance in particular to look at it because it does start to overlap a little bit with JPAC policy and a lobbying. My read of it looks great, like supporting transit money seems great. And we can't change it, so I'm not asking you to change it. It's the area where it talks about, for me, what I've been kind of thinking through is how the federal funds could be more helpful to the city of Milwaukee for bike and ped infrastructure, and particularly expensive bike and ped infrastructure. A lot of times this last mile connection that you need to make. Sorry, Kathy.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually see the letter.
Oh.
I don't know where it went in my email, but I can't find it. So if you could resend that, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened.
You just mean the general sign-on letter that was.
Yeah, I'll send you the latest one that I just got that has the signatures. So I'll send you a link right now in the chat.
Great. Sorry.
We could
it's okay.
write our
You're
own
telling me all these things that are really important. I want to be able to see it.
No, it's okay. And I'm doing this a little bit more just to crosswalk some of the conversations I've had with Councillor Heisey with this letter. I think they can all go together like puzzle pieces, right? It seems great. Go ahead and advocate for the message, which is you should invest in public transit. Public transit needs to come back. That's what this letter is saying. Post-COVID, it's going to need more help. You got to breathe life into it. Don't just keep funding it the way you've always funded it. Great. No problem. I think my recommendation is that you would sign it. It does get into some elements in that letter, though, where it talks about we also want to support bike and ped funding for locals, but their mechanism is TOD, which is transit oriented development. It's great. Not actually what I think we need. We need like money to build like a bike and ped bridge or an undercross, like expensive bike ped infrastructure that gets you to that last mile. And their version of last mile is TOD, which in some cases is okay, but it's just, I think you might hear Councillor Heisey saying different things like at the JPAC table. So I just wanted to make that clear. I don't think it's a reason not to sign the letter.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Thanks. And yeah, TOD is a great program that does really good things, but it restricts too much where the money can be spent that we need to get to make our bike ped infrastructure truly functional and viable and workable as a way to get around instead of a car. Yeah, I'm good.
Do we need to talk about the REACH bill at all before we see Karin?
I think we can just say, it's moving and
please keep moving.
Yeah, it keeps moving, and the general sense from the coalition has been pretty positive at this point. So I think we just encourage her to continue supporting it.
Now, I don't remember, did that land in general Ways and Means or in that same subcommittee?
I thought it was in the subcommittee.
I didn't follow that one because it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it went to the subcommittee.
So that means it has to get voted on twice to get to the floor. Lisa, you're muted if you said something.
Well, I was just saying it was in your Thorn Run report today, but I don't remember specifically what it said.
Yeah, I sort of skimmed that. I didn't catch that one.
So policy-wise, all eyes are on this subcommittee of Ways and Means. That's kind of helpful, right? It's all in place. And I would just encourage to ask, but then also, as I'm sure you would, just ask her what we can do. Give her a chance to tell us what assistance she thinks we can help provide on the lobby side to help make her conversations easier. Is always nice. And then last but not least, so lottery bonds. So I put those, Representative Power reached out. She said, if you could meet these parameters and you could build it in their lottery bond eligible projects, which means it's usually capital and to expend it within a certain time frame, what would you use it for? And I was like, well, we need more money for Monroe, which I'm going to talk to you more about next month. And so that would be top of the list. And then also the Milwaukee Bay Park had put in money for the trolley trail realignment portion. They'd applied for Community Pathways grant and they didn't get that grant. So we just put that back in. We're like, hey, this was a state funding program. This is state money. We didn't get it over here. You could fund it through lottery and it's eligible. So that's what the two requests were. And so if she just asks you about that tonight, and usually I probably wouldn't do it on camera as I am, but if she did ask, what could I give you less? Always, we're going to take what we can get, so that would just be a follow-up conversation about, but I tried to center the request for the lottery money so Monroe Greenway is A, B, C, D, E, 5 segments, right? Right at the other side of Linwood. A, B, and C are right there on either side. That's 224 on either side of it. So I focused the request on A, B, and C to tie in to downtown and Milwaukee Marketplace, that kind of central Milwaukee economic area. So that was part of the justification for economic development focused money as well, is that connection to downtown. So that's why it's centered there, which I hope is appealing to them. So
what is the, is this something that the legislature earmarks, or is this something that's going on outside of the session, or what exactly are these lottery bonds?
I believe this is the money that comes at the end of session in the capital construction bill. So these are earmarks. Okay. There's a bill called the capital construction bill. It's also called the Christmas tree bill, but they probably don't call it that anymore. But and there's projects that are named. I think that's where this is, but I can confirm that. The funding that was under discussion in the governor's office is actually them seeking input on they could use their Recovery Act money. So a little different.
Great.
But if she may have different information on that.
Yes, I just wanted to mention also, besides Senate Bill 784, which has the Green Tariff, House Bill 2021 has the exact same language for the Green Tariff bill. So, that's a bill that's moved to the Revenue Committee at the House. So there's another pathway there for the Green Tariff.
Right.
But if Northwest Natural hasn't gotten an amendment in there yet, I bet they're just jonesing to put the same language in.
That's going to be a steeper hill for them to climb, because that's a bill created by the environmental groups who they were going to oppose our bill after the Northwest Natural language went in, and I got just be neutral, but they're not happy.
Yeah.
So.
Good.
Anything else before we go to Scott? Seeing nothing. Scott, interview scheduling.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you. Good afternoon. So I hope this is a fairly quick conversation, but I just wanted to highlight that the staff report overviews the board and commission interview and application process. And it's something that we are working. We've talked about this in past leadership summits with our board and committee member chairs. And it's something the staff has been working on for the last couple of years. But the one piece I want to talk to you about today and get your feedback on is the actual scheduling of interviews. It is a point that that we've been able to get by with in the last few years, but as I think I may have remarked to the mayor in a phone call last week, there's a good problem. There's a good issue in that you guys are so popular, your schedules are quite full. And it has created the problem that when we go to schedule interviews, it's members of council unavailability that has led us to delay and have to restart scheduling processes. And so I just we want to lay out some possibilities of ways to fix that. And the staff report suggests a few. And I'm fully aware that Mayor Gamba and this council and your predecessors for the last 2 decades have found it critical that council members play a role in this process. And we're not in any way suggesting that that be removed. Of course, that is completely your discretion as outlaid in the charter. But we just wanted to highlight all the possibilities. And so that's what the staff report does. And I think pretty much just open to your feedback. To this point, for the benefit of the audience, when we have enough applications on file for a vacant position on a board and committee, an interview panel is assembled, and that panel includes 2 members of council and the chair of the committee and the staff liaison to the committee. And getting those 4 schedules to align does take a bit of moon in the right location in the sky sometimes and things like that. So that's the situation I present to you, and I think I covered all the talking points that I had. I see Councillor Heisey's hand is up. So I really just want feedback from y'all.
And I'm going to make it even more complicated. Just in that I've done a lot of interviews in the past couple of years, and I have had this experience of interviewing really good people, and then they aren't chosen because there's even better people for this particular position. They're interested in multiple committees, so I end up interviewing them again. And then they don't get selected for that committee either. So then we have the problem of potentially interviewing them a 3rd time. It feels like a real burden to put on someone who's really, truly, and this has happened several times, and every time it's been excellent candidates, and it's just been the case of getting the right fit. So looking at all of the different options that you very nicely put out there for us, I feel like we could address that and the scheduling issue if we did just the twice a year approach. In part because in some of the more recent interviews, when we've had a whole slew of we just did this with the library, for example, we had a slew of really great candidates. And what we ended up doing was selecting 2, but then saying, if a vacancy occurred, let's please keep this person in mind if something changes. So we don't have to go back through the interview process all over again, but can just say, all right, you're up. So I would love to be able to do that. I think that would be kinder in a lot of ways for everyone. And I would hope that we could think through a way to also address that problem of subjecting people to multiple interviews in some way. I know that's a harder one to tackle, but I would love to at least consider some solutions for that.
Lisa?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think, that addresses something you, Mr. Mayor, have brought up several times when we've done interviews about the desire to have an on-deck person, which we did have a period where Planning Commission had an on-deck person. So I like that. I also I think it might be better for staff. It's like one big recruitment sort of at the last quarter of the year to get the pool together for interviews in January and February or whatever cycle we end up with. But Maybe it's kind of, when we did was it the CPIC and the City Hall, where we were kind of all at City Hall doing interviews the same day, and then we kind of horse traded about certain ones. I think that was pretty effective and helped make sure that people, who might not be the best fit here got considered here or whatever. So I like that idea. And I don't even know, I would like to hope that even maybe once a year would be enough if we're going to appoint on deck people.
Peter?
I was going to say we did that with Alexis, but we had a really a short window between interviewing and then somebody else dropping off the tree board.
Yeah, I think the only way going to once or twice a year is going to work is if we do have an on-deck system, because you're invariably going to have somebody who has to move out of town or has to do this right in the middle of the period, and you could end up with a quorum problem. So I think if we're going to move it to, fewer times of the year that we're doing this, we absolutely must do on deck. I liked the fourth Tuesday concept, except the problem of the planning commission. So if we're interviewing for the planning commission, how do we get the chair and the staff member on the night of a planning, So I'm okay with the twice a year. We used to do it that way back when I first got on council. But we ran into quorum issues. That's why we developed the on-deck thing in the first place. So yeah, if we establish a good on-deck system, I'm okay with going twice a year.
So knowing that we're probably heading this direction then, we would come back to you with a schedule and we would put these on your calendars months in advance. So our one ask is it'll move those weekends just because of the sheer volume that we'll have to get through. So if you can hold those dates once they're on your calendar, we would really appreciate it.
And I think I saw Kathy, your hand was up at one point, but my initial thought was we have a little cleanup to get to. So if we were to move this, I'll have to work with Ann and Amy, but like maybe one big, we have some that are ongoing that we do need to reply to still. So I think the arts maybe is the one we're trying to nail down now. So if you haven't done that, please respond to Amy. Kathy?
I was just going to say that because we hadn't explicitly talked about retaining council oversight of this, I do want to continue to have council participate in the interviews. I do still think that's important. And I'm sorry for the burden that we place on staff because I know it's significant.
Yeah, I especially apologize to Amy. This last one has just been crazy because she's tried so hard and it's just, it's been crazy.
You guys are just so popular, not only in our city, but regionally. You're in hot demand.
Yeah.
So we'll probably set these for June and January. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Then if there is nothing else, we are adjourned from the work session. We will see you all back here at 6 o'clock. Oh, different here. The same virtual.